Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm Steven, your host, and let me introduce my co-host, David.
Hey, this is Dave.
So, just to give you a little bit of our bona fides before we jump right in, I've been playing gacha for about, I think it's been 12, 14 years now. Started out with a game called Fantasika, and have been playing ever since. I'm a light spender, wouldn't really consider myself a whale. Don't spend more than maybe an MMO subscription a month on any given game. And that's sort of my background. David, how about you give a quick introduction?
Yeah, so for me, similar to you in terms of the timelines in the gacha realm, and actually Fantasy was my first gacha game as well, which for those that remember that, it was a tower defense game similar to Arc Knights in that regards, but with less repositioning. More you plan it and it goes. But that was a lot of fun way back when. And of course, over the course of time, just been playing gacha games on top of what we've grown up with. We started out as couch co-op, right, for our generation, and has now moved to the mobile setting. Myself, I tend to lean more free to play. I've dropped maybe $50 in the last 2 years of gacha gaming over the course of various games, most of that being in Genshin, but tend to be free to play in other gachas. So for today's topic, I really wanted to start with the podcast off really with how we start every gacha game ever, and that's re-rolling, right? So for those that of course are familiar with gacha games, we all know that re-rolling hell that we go through if we do that. But for those that are maybe the uninitiated, re-rolling is when you start a game and you get to that point in the gacha game where you're pulling for your units, and maybe you don't get the unit you want. That's either your favorite looking one or one that's a really good part of your team comp. And so you just reset the data, you erase the data essentially, start over, do however long it takes you for the tutorial to get back to those polls until you get a result that you want, and then you continue to play the game, right? So, Steve, my first question for you is going to be, do you believe in re-rolling or not?
So, no. To be 100% honest, I do not believe in re-rolling. It's a weird way to say it, but I do not personally re-roll. I find that I tend to shoot from the hip, and that usually I want my account to feel organic, and re-rolling to me does not feel organic to gacha gaming. I don't see why other people shouldn't be allowed to. I have no problem against it in a moral sense or anything like that. It's just not my preference to re-roll in most gacha games. How about yourself?
For me, yeah, as far as re-rolling, it honestly it comes down to the gacha game itself. Similarly, like I'm here for people to re-roll if they want to re-roll by all means. I've also seen a lot of people get really good at making it an efficient attempt to re-roll in games with the use of emulators and running different instances of it. But that's for those of us that use emulators. For those of us on mobile, right? For me, it boils down to, is it a game I'm going to be playing long term? And is it a game that maybe I'm trying out with the potential to play long term, or is it a game that like I know I'm going to be in, right? So if it's a game that I'm in, I know I'm gonna be in for the long term. So a game like, let's take Genshin for instance, right? I didn't re-roll in Genshin because I know that I'm gonna be playing it for a long period of time because I was fascinated with the art style, the concept, and everything with all the pre-launch drip marketing they did. And so I was like, I'm gonna be in this game for a while, so I'll eventually get kind of everything that I'm looking for from the game. I don't need that meta unit. And plus, there's also, Genshin doesn't have a huge PvP scene in the traditional sense, so it's not as important to reroll in a game like Genshin. Whereas maybe other gacha games out there that do have that high PvP focus, like Epic 7 just had a big tournament that was pretty successful, I think, in the terms of what it could be, where people are spending thousands upon thousands of dollars to be competitive in the PvP scene. Rerolling might be a little bit more important in a game like that, assuming you hit it on launch, right?
Yeah, okay, I can definitely see that. One of the points that you brought up was the financial benefits of re-rolling. That depending on the game, there can be a potentially hundreds to thousands of dollars benefit to re-rolling your going through the re-rolling process. where, going and taking an account just sort of bog standard and letting the dice decide, as it were, might actually be potentially, costing you money. How do you feel about that as an argument both for and against rerolling?
I mean, as far as like for me, that's is mostly free to play, right? The idea of costs savings isn't really a factor for me in that regards, because to me I'm approaching the game from the free to play perspective, and then if a game really grips me and I want to say, hey, developers, keep doing your thing, I'll throw some money at it maybe. But for somebody who's playing a game on day one launch of the game, and they are fully intent to go full bore into this game, they want to be the top of the leaderboards and the rankings, re-rolling for that competitive edge is a viable thing to do. Now, most of those folks, again, they're going to be wailing for the game ultimately. So, do they really need to re-roll is another question if you're wailing in a game, right? But as a free to play, for that particular instance, re-rolling may be beneficial because you're not going to have unlimited resources to go get every unit that is going to be the unit that you need to win in PvP and earlier to push PvE content, right? So, I mean, for me, in rerolling in a game, I have to make sure that I'm going to be, if it's a PvP focused game, I'm going to be in it for the long haul if I'm going to reroll. Because if it's one that I'm maybe not so sure about, for instance, there was, I usually try like every gacha game when it comes out, but I don't know if I'm going to stick around it, but I'll at least give it a fair shake. And so for games like that, I'm not necessarily going to reroll. My probably my biggest re-rolling heartache, right? That I have the longest I spent re-rolling on the game, I ended up spending the shortest amount of time on before I deleted, was I think it was Time Defenders. It was made by the same studio that did King's Raid. Now I loved King's Raid when that came out. I stopped playing that game around when I think there was Soul Weapons and then Soul Artifacts was the second type of thing that came out that was pay to winish. And I stopped playing King's Raid around that, but I loved everything else about it in terms of the character models, the fact that you could unlock characters through just you could buy them in the shop for premium currency that you could earn in game, right? But anyway, Time Defenders was kind of a tower defense game, and so yeah, you're starting to see a trend here:
Yeah.
Fantasika, Arknights, and that. And I think I spent a day and a half re-rolling, and then eventually, as I got into later stages, I was like, man, this is way too cluttered on the phone. It's just too much, and the UI was very clunky. And then I ended up dropping the game. I think before the 7-day, login events at launch, I hadn't even gotten all 7 days worth of stuff yet, and I stopped. I stopped playing. So
Uh,
that was, I guess, has scarred me a little bit from re-rolling on games that I'm not fully knowing everything about yet. How about yourself?
I mean, for myself, like I said, I don't want to say I'm anti reroll, but at least personally, I don't see the value for time in it. And I brought up the money argument less as a actual like, hey, spend money sort of argument, more as a representation of value, I guess. If you really want a certain character, or for meta reasons, you feel that you have to have a certain character, re-rolling is a way to get that value. But at least personally, especially at launch, so much of a game's meta just isn't known. Bring this kind of around to the Hoyoverse group of games. Bennett, when the game first came out, Bennett would have been a feather in your cap pool now, but at the time, everyone kind of discounted him and went, he's nothing. He's kind of garbage. He's kind of garbo. These other units are just so much better. Kiki, or Chi-Chi, QI. I can never pronounce her
GG,
name.
yeah.
Yeah, Chi-Chi. She was considered a top tier type unit because she's a healer and and look how great she is. And then as time has gone on, I mean, she's become a byword for a failed roll. If you get 50-50, sorry, man, you got Chi-Chi. And so there's a certain amount of, why would I re-roll, go through that entire process, the rigmarole around it, for something that in 3 months' time, maybe, not even going to be worth it. Like, if I'm going to stick with the game in the long haul, it doesn't really matter. And if I'm going to drop the game in under a week anyways, what does it matter? Again, nothing against people who enjoy it. There's definitely something to the dopamine hit that you can get from getting lots of free rolls. I'm definitely not going to discount that. But on a personal level, I don't feel that there's a time to money, time to value relationship there with re-rolling. Having said that, I do think that a lot more gachas should have some system that makes re-rolling more reasonable. I mean, it's fairly common practice within the fan base, within people who do play gachas. So having it so that the first set of rolls that you do, you're either have a character selector where it's okay, fine, you can select, the character that you want out of the SSRs or what have you, whatever rank the game uses, 5 stars, 5 costs, whatever, or has some sort of infinite reroll or a very large reroll pool to make it someone easy to hit what you want. I'm behind that. I'm behind players having options, having choices, and not having to jump through all those hoops in order to get.
Sure. Make re-rolling easy. It's in the fabric of the game. There's no reason not to, right? You're not going to tick anybody off for making something more accessible. And that's kind of what I want to talk about next is different games and their approach to the reroll, right? Because some are very reroll friendly in terms of giving you unlimited 10 pulls that you can reroll, but you can only keep one of them, right? Others are more friendly and win. They let you access that type of thing, right? Some let you do it maybe after they hold your hand in a tutorial for like a stage fight or two, whereas others maybe make you go through the whole first chapter of stages before they let you unlock that 10 pull summon, right? And then of course you have others that hate rerolling and they make it near impossible to do it because they make you maybe register an email account, and I mean that's a whole nother level of things. Just make it more accessible for your players. That's my ultimate take on it, because you're not hurting anybody. People are gonna find a way to do it. If you do try and make it near impossible, it only makes people happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll play devil's advocate, even though,
Bring it
again,
on.
I
Sure.
agree with you. Again, I don't think there's any issue with it. I'm going to loop this all back around to Hoyoverse. With Honkai Star Rail, if you don't get the standard banner character that you wanted at launch, you had 300 pools until you could get them. That's a tough ask.
Yeah, I still
It,
haven't hit mine yet. I still haven't hit 300 yet on the standard banner, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to my shame, I have, but again, I have some benefits over you with the battle pass and so on and so forth. So I managed to get my Bronya that way, but if that didn't exist, I still wouldn't have a Bronya. I've gotten 2 Edelons for Bailu, but still no Bronya naturally. I had to pick her off the chart. So I am very thankful that that exists, but I get why people would re-roll there. There are characters that you want. But from a company point of view, I'm of 2 minds on it, where I feel like, this is probably going to depend on how all these different metrics are recorded and looked at and mattered. But I wonder if there are certain companies who don't mind re-rolling because it inflates the install numbers. Like, millions of players, because technically from the company's point of view, when they're looking at people who reroll, you can look at it and you go, oh hey, look, there's been millions of players who have downloaded your game, and that becomes a nice little tagline that you can stick on. It doesn't matter that 20,000 of those downloads, those installs, what have you, those accounts that were created are basically burner accounts. They're reroll accounts. So I mean, that's an easy way to inflate your numbers. So I feel like there is a benefit to having rerolling on the company side. Having said that, there's also the negative of now you've got a bunch of burner accounts that aren't generating revenue. Because at the end of the day, that's what gacha games are. They're a way to make money. They need people spending.
Sure.
So
Well, and you remember a few months ago too, you talk about the cost of creating accounts. There was the drama with Unity and the changes that were happening there, and people were talking about, well, this is going to kill a lot of those smaller indie developers for these
Hmm.
gacha games because they were going to charge for every account that was created, which would have included the re-rolling accounts. And now it
Uh,
went away. I think Unity eventually ended up going away and is not happening. Is not the case if memory serves.
Correct. They did walk back on that. To be fair, that was also based off of install, not necessarily account. But depending on how you set up your reroll, it might have required a full
Right.
fresh install. So, yeah, that could affect certain users. So, having said that as a potential benefit to the company, I understand that that's really a very soft argument as to how rerolling helps the company. The more honest answer is that I'm not going to say it's stealing. It's not stealing. You're behaving according to the rules, as far as I'm aware, for most games. To basically just redo the tutorial over and over again until you get an optimized roll, whatever it is that you want. But you are kind of taking advantage of the grace period. It's the going into, I guess, for those of you not outside the U.S. or who don't have Costco's or big box stores, it's going around and eating all the free samples at these stores. Yeah, there's nobody stopping you from doing it, but not really the reason why they're there. You shouldn't be stuffing your face full of little plastic cups of Pop Tart or whatever it is that they're giving away. It's not really the intent, and I can see why companies put those roadblocks in place to prevent people from. I don't want to say again abusing. I don't feel like it's abuse, but for fully taking advantage of those systems that there is a potential revenue loss when you get in and you get the character you want. For the type of person who might have been a spender, they're not going to go out and spend to get that character anymore. They don't have to. They got the character. Now, would they go out and then spend for each constellation or spend for the weapon or spend for maybe not. I don't know. Again, I don't have the market data on that, but
Yeah, we're just
yeah,
kind of speculating and spitballing, right?
yeah.
Well, what I would even counter argument that, right? Because how many times we've been on Reddit or even in our own personal gotcha experience, saved up for a unit, we go to pull, we miss the unit, and we're disheartened, and it makes us feel like we kind of want to quit the game, right? So that person that maybe can't re-roll or doesn't re-roll because the system makes it a little bit too hard to, and then they don't get the unit that they want to start with, and they feel like they're not behind, they're a little bit behind the eight ball essentially. Is that going to lead them to stop playing the game and thus any potential future revenue, whether it be through ad revenue or because they choose to spend money in the game, right? You've lost out on that potential customer, that potential revenue. So it's kind of like a fine line you almost have to walk in that regards, to your point.
Yeah, and I guess my counter argument. Well, we can go back and forth on this one. I feel like for Hoyoverse in particular, it seems like they are fairly strongly against the idea of re-rolling. Where they, with Genshin, we saw it where it was what a 30-minute optimized path in order to re-roll in a Genshin account. I think was what
Yeah,
I
I
saw.
was I was going to make the case that Genshin and Star Rail are not reroll friendly, but
Yeah,
that's what I think you're getting to.
yeah. That's basically my point. Is that Genshin Star Rail they're really not re-roll friendly. That they seem to have a fairly strong stance at Hoyoverse that we don't want you re-rolling. We want you to play the game as it's given to you. We don't want you to try and optimize. We don't want you to try and go in and get that Diluc on your beginner's role type account.
Yes.
That golden Diluc on your beginner role account, which I had a friend who got that, and I was very jealous, especially when he then quit the game 2 weeks later. But that's a neither
Now,
here.
now to their credit though, this again, it's they're not reroll friendly, but they don't, in my opinion, need to be because again, the game isn't one that has a need to have the specific meta unit. There's not content in it that is super challenging as there is in other stuff. There is challenge
Mm-hmm.
in some of the content in both Star Rail and Genshin, but you don't have to do any major min-maxing. Like if anybody harkens back to, or maybe they still play MMOs. Like for me, it was WoW back in before 2010, sitting on, elitist jerks, min-maxing a hunter shot rotation and to maximize DPS, right? Was it Beast Mastery? Was it Marksman, right? What do we do? You don't have to do that to be successful in getting rewards in different events so they don't, like I said, so they don't necessarily have to be reroll friendly, but a game where maybe you do need to do that, or you do have to have some semblance of a meta team that you follow. When those types of games aren't reroll friendly, that's when I'm sitting here going, "It's why you're shooting yourself in the foot. You you don't really want to, alienate yourself from your gaming audience." But yeah,
But is that a re-rolling problem, or is that a game design issue? And neither of us are game designers, but you know, having to have a very specific team, very specific loadout to be successful, I feel like re-rolling in that sort of game is a failure of the game design, if that makes sense. Like, why should you need that very specific build to be successful? Having options is something that, for the most part, we want in our games, regardless of if they're gacha or if they're
this is true.
other.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But more what I'm getting at is that to get a leg up, to get maybe a quicker advancement through whatever content it may be, there's some pattern of a meta to follow. And like I said, it's not necessarily re-rolling versus game design. It's, if that is your game design, it's just something to consider, right? It's something that you got to take into account if you're making a game with that design where you want to have a formulated meta. Do we want our players to be able to really deal with the cards as they may and not really make re-rolling a thing? Or do we want to at least give them a little bit of help to get started and give them this SSR selector, or give them a unlimited 10 pulls? Or some do, you get 30 10 pulls, but you can only choose one of them. Or like a game that just came out recently, Echo Copolypse or Echo Copolypse, something like that. I tried that one out, and they do where they'll give you, you get like 10 pulls. You get to keep one of them, but you can't collect the 10 pull, and then you can't collect them until you get to a certain chapter. And then at that chapter, maybe you do 10 more 10 pulls, but then you can't get the result of that one until a few more chapters down the road. And that's interesting to me because it is giving you the rewards. It's forcing you to play the game. And I would argue that that's a weird middle ground of not really friendly, but it's not unfriendly.
I don't know. I really don't like that. I think that I would end up kind of almost dropping it. Just be, I don't know.
Now,
It's the holding candy out and then going like, oh,
now
it's a little bit too blatant.
this particular game also touches on a point you mentioned earlier, where we talk about day one releases, and there's not really a meta that's been established yet, like with Genshin, right? Because then it was like, whatever, it's all about Chi-Chi, and now Chi-Chi is a meme, right?
Yeah.
But with this particular game, it actually has been out for a few months or maybe even a year. I'm not sure the exact how far ahead I want to say the Japanese or the Chinese market is ahead of the global servers. Now, I'm sure we'll be sped up and get banners at an accelerated rate to ultimately catch up. But there is already kind of a defined meta, and we can see which units are falling off versus which units have staying power from those initial banners, which is an interesting thing to take into account when we get that advantage of our friends over in Asia.
Yeah, and that's a good point that is worth considering. When in the game's life cycle are you doing the rerolling? If you're doing it 2 years, 3 years into the game, is it really that much of a benefit versus something like the situation you brought up where it's, you're starting on a fresh server with 6 months of theory crafting behind you to kind of craft your perfect launch is sort of it. Like, it's that idea of like, okay, I can have the perfect account from the get-go. I don't have to worry about making those mistaken pulls or so on and so forth. So I can definitely see the appeal.
Yeah, to clarify, when we've been talking about re-rolling up to I think essentially this point, we're assuming day one launch server, right? If you're coming into a game and you weren't, it's not day one, but yeah, like again, like if you were to start Epic 7 now, don't reroll. Just go. Like to me, that just go. They're probably going to give you so much in catch-up bonuses, right? And to try and get you to stay. I mean, in to be realistic, you're never going to catch up to a lot of the accounts that have been going since day one
Mm.
unless you start shelling out money. But they do a decent enough job having you catch up that you can start clearing content and have enough polls where you don't need to sit there and re-roll like I remember doing day one. And I'm going to go back to Epic 7 because I remember everybody, not me, but everybody re-rolling for Vildred was the unit that you wanted. And then when they were introducing with the Moonlight or the basically the Moon and Light characters or the Light and Dark characters, it was a Vildred, and then at the time I think it was there was a character Ken, I think I forget. Basically, he had a huge counterattack that was like an AOE thing, and he was the unit you were trying to go for. But that's a whole nother discussion. Moonlight versus the standard triangle, right, of
Yeah.
grass and fire and water. That's a whole nother discussion to get into. So as far as rerolling goes, yeah, like I said, it's to me, it's make it accessible to your players. It doesn't hurt you. I think it can only help. And as far as like the different methods to do it, me personally, I like the dopamine hits. Don't just give me the selector. Let me roll. Let me roll 10 times for like an unlimited amount of times. So that way I have that chance maybe of hitting maybe two or three, 5 stars or SSRs, right? Others may disagree with me on that. They just want to get their 5 star and go. But I like the dopamine hit personally.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think I'm on the selector side of it. I'd really just rather be able to pick my poison and roll out from there instead of having to spend potentially an hour. Because I'll be honest, if they give me the option to do just infinite rolls, I'm gonna try and optimize that roll. The other half, I guess, the other side of the anti-selector argument would be fine. All that ends up happening is that you do the selector, and then as soon as you get the early rolls, the generous beginner rolls, people start re-rolling those instead of the selector. But I don't know.
Well, maybe you're the popular opinion and I'm the unpopular one. I don't know. I know maybe folks will let us know in the comments. But let's go ahead and jump into our next couple topics here. Some news going on in the Hoyoverse world here with Genshin and Star Rail.
All right.
All right, so yeah, wanting to talk about our next news stuff that dropped this week with some new content with Star Rail. We saw the drop of some Critters event in Star Rail. We saw some changes in terms of the Battle Pass in Star Rail, and of course, probably the biggest one is whenever a new character drops, right? So we have Rune May that came out this week. Now she looks amazing. Hoyo always does a great job with their drip marketing, really making these characters look great. Their character videos are wonderful, and I really was interested in her. But Steve, you reminded me that I have basically a Nihility account, and I should be holding off on Rune May and saving up because I am tapped out from pulling for Ho-Oh for my second MOC team needing a healer. But you did have space for Rune May. You were going to plan to pull for her. And how did those polls go? And have you been able, did you pre-farm as much as you could for her, or were you able to get any play in with her yet? What's going on? Where are you with her?
So a lot of questions to answer there. So really quickly, I did pull for her. She came home. I won my 50-50. Won my 50-50 for her.
Nice.
I lived dangerously. I actually had built some pity on the previous banner, on the Silver Wolf half of that banner, just in case I did end up getting burned like that. But I built a little pity up to 50, actually. And Ron May came home within 30 pulls. So I was very happy with that. I had pre-farmed for her, gathered all the mats and so forth that I needed in order to get her nice and built up, and I'd been aware somewhat of what the requirements were for her equipment, and I was able to put a decent set together based off of rumors in the void and so on and so forth. Floating around on the internet. Those of you who know where to look for advice
So
on
those of you who
upcoming
dream,
characters.
you know.
Well,
So for
you don't have to be a lucid dreamer to find it. Reddit has the locations
that's
if you
true.
want to know. Just
So
saying.
so what is so talk a little bit about her kit, why people were so excited about her, and then talk about how that works with within your team, and what set did you end up running for?
So Ruan-Mei, I'm going to really heavily summarize her kit. I'm not going to go into the specifics of what each ability and
Yeah, I
so
don't
forth
need
does.
numbers, but what does
Yeah,
she
yeah.
do? What's her job?
She basically makes it easier for you to cause breaks on teams, and then when you do cause breaks, it extends them. Her ultimate allows you to extend breaks by 1 turn. So if you freeze somebody, they unfreeze, then they break, and then they break again. And she does do damage based off of her break effect, regardless of when or who breaks somebody. So if you have just to pull a name out of a hat, Silverwolf breaks an enemy, Ruan-Mei gets to apply her break effect to that break. So she'll do an additional hit of damage based off of her break effect on that break that occurred, even though it wasn't ice, it wasn't her that triggered it, it was Silverwolf. So she's very heavily built around breaking and break efficiency. She makes your team better at breaking stuff and keeping them broken. That's using the word break a lot. I do apologize. But that's really what she does. She's a support character. She also comes kind of out of the box with a pretty hefty damage bonus against enemies that are broken. She does come with I believe it's a 10% percentage speed buff native on her.
Speed buff just there all the time? Is that constant uptime, or is that her skill?
No, that's a constant uptime on everyone
Oh.
but herself. So it's nice. It's definitely a Benny. I wouldn't say that it's not good to have. My overall take on her is that she's very good. I know that a lot of content creators out there have been going like, "Oh, she's the best thing since sliced bread." She's amazing, must pool, 10-10, etc. And I don't disagree. I just think that she's been overhyped to a certain degree, where at least on the teams that I've run her in, she is helpful, but she's not the difference between a failed run and a successful run, at least on my account. So I have Ruan-Mei on my Jingliu team. I run that team as Fushuan, Jingliu, now Ruan-Mei, and Bronya. So really, Ruan-Mei is filling the role that Pella would fill on that team normally. So instead of defense shred, it's additional bonus, additional speed. Bronya is a little redundant in that effect. Having the additional turn somewhat offsets the additional speed, but regardless, that's sort of the team I run her in, where she's nice. She is also, I would say, a very good general buffer, general support harmony character on any given team. With all that said, though, I don't think that she's as must-have as a lot of people make her out to be. I think if you do have other supports, you'll do fine. If you happened to pull for HOYO, I can't pronounce her name. I keep on wanting to call her HOYO.
Mr. Tail.
Mr. Tail. If you pulled for Mr. Tail, in some ways you have a very equivalent character, lots of damage, extra energy. I think that as long as you have other supports, you don't need to worry too badly about missing out on her, especially given the landscape that we're going into. We've just come out of a period of a lot of DPSs. I think personally, this is just me spitballing into the future. I cannot prove any of this, but I believe we're going into a period where we're going to start seeing a lot more supports, primarily because we haven't seen a lot of 5-star support characters come out. Like, most of them have been destruction characters, erudition characters, nihility characters. We haven't seen harmony. We've gotten we've only gotten 1 preservation, and we've gotten 2 abundance. So I think we're going to start seeing that side of the roster get filled out a little bit, just because they're blank places on the canvas. Again, can't prove anything, but that's sort of my thought on that. As far as how to build her, go heavy break effect. I know a lot of people say 180 is the break point. I would say make sure that you get Ruan-Mei to at least 134 speed, and from that point on, it's break effect or bust, and any survivability that you feel is necessary for the character. And that's it. That would be the build.
Well, I'll be interested to see if your prediction on kind of what we see down the pipeline pans out, because to me, I think the reason that you see a lot more DPS characters than support characters is your team is typically going to have 1 support. And if you have a hyper carry team focus, obviously you have the 1 carry, but there are some that maybe run a main DPS and a sub DPS. So your team compositions tend to have more space for a DPS. Whereas if you get that one healer or that one support, that's it. Boxes checked. Like you don't need any more types. So we'll see what pans out. I am interested in what's down the pipeline.
Yeah. Quick caveat, I guess, or counter argument to that is
Sure.
while you are correct, typically you only need one support. At least at the moment, team building is hyper carry heavy. So it's one main DPS, one preservation, one surviving character, one character to help you endure. I can't remember what the term is off the top of my head, doesn't matter. And then you have 2 flex slots for Harmony, for support characters that help buff the damage. So I think there's more room in that area for MiHoYo or for HoYoverse to play around with. So that would be sort of my counter argument to that. But I could be wrong.
Like I said, I'm excited to see what they do next. With what we have right around the pipeline, obviously we have the Dr. Ratio is been announced to be free, and he's going to be coming shortly. We have the Critters event going on right now, which kind of introduces him a little bit. Have you done any of the Critters story? I don't want to dive in and spoil anything if you haven't.
I've completed the story quest for this section as well as the Critter sub event.
I haven't done the sub event yet, but I did the story quest, and his introduction with the alabaster head and playing chess against himself definitely made him more interesting to me than I initially was from his drip marketing. Some of his voice actor I thought was very good in that first opening scene with him. I'm interested to see how he plays into the story a little bit more, and then character wise. Yeah, once he's released and we get to play with him, we'll be able to speak more about that in the coming weeks. But the other thing I wanted to talk about that came out here with Rune May, some other things in the patch notes that maybe got lost in the sauce, as it were some of the changes in terms of the battle pass changes for your dailies, and even to affect your weeklies kind of got changed up a little bit. What are your thoughts, Steve, on the new battle pass?
I'm a big fan of the changes in some ways. The going up to 70 is something that I'm very, very happy with as someone who typically was completing the battle pass in 3 weeks and then basically having nothing to do, never having to touch that tab. The additional credits, the additional plastic, whatever it is that material that allows you to roll additional relics, artifacts. I can't remember. I think they're relics in
for the paid portion of the battle pass, right?
Yeah, again, for everyone listening, I get the battle pass.
That's right. You're Mr. Spender over there for battle passes. I am on the free to play. Yeah. So on the free to play battle pass, it's. I know we talked about this when we were doing sound testing, but it's 10,000 credits per level beyond 50 up to 70, and then you get 10 of those.
Yeah, it's
whatever they're called to help you craft the 5-star artifacts. Yeah.
So having those is nice. I'm less of a fan of the way that they've changed dailies. I don't like it. But having said that, I can see where the advantages come from. I can see how it's more flexible, how you don't have to go through as many hoops. There are fewer days that I log in and I just go, ugh, God, I have to do this, I really don't want to do that, or this one's going to be a pain in the butt. But again, having said that, those days where I logged in and went, this is a pain in the butt, were the days I did the daily missions. Instead of trying to end a battle on an ultimate this way, I could cap that out. Under the current system, I don't see a reason why I will ever do daily missions outside of wanting to do them, or feeling that I should do them for content reasons or what, like to experience them. There's no mechanical force pushing me to do them outside of feeling that I need to.
Yeah, because we'll get to the point where credits aren't an issue anymore, so the 20,000 or whatever you get for completing it doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Yeah.
For me, the changes, I like the flexibility that just using, Mora, or not Mora, I'm sorry, Genshin, using your energy, right, on any dungeon type, whether it be a gold or a crimson one, whether it be or whether you want to farm artifact sets or whether you want to farm the ascension materials. It doesn't force you for the dailies to do any specific one like it did. It just you can go continue to farm whatever you were needing to farm that particular day or that particular week for whatever character you're working on, right? So I can appreciate that. And then as far as the battle pass changes, yeah, like I said, adding the 20 extra levels, even if it is just credits for us free to play players, we're still on a point where credits can be consumed pretty quickly, especially when you're trying to get some of those higher talent levels on some of your characters, right?
Mm.
You know, I'm not at the point like I am in Genshin where I'm sitting on 23 million Mora. Like I'm just not there. I have like a couple million credits maybe, and that can go very quickly when you're leveling a new character, especially if you are leveling a new character after just having leveled another character type thing. If you get in a pull session of multiple banners in a row or with very little break times, it's helpful.
Yeah. Again, overall, I would say that the changes are overall positive. There's just some minor fiddly bits that I'm left kind of going like, and they moved my cheese. You know, there are two type of people in the world. You know, those that are fine with change and those that are resistant to it. And in this regard, I'm a little resistant to it.
You gotta stay flexible. You can't be rigid, Steve. The one thing that's constant in the world is change, right? So we can't be stuck in our old ways. We gotta go with the flow, as it were. And speaking of the flow, I want to flow over into Genshin and talk about events there. So we have the Roses and Muskets event going on here during the Navia banner. And I will say I was very excited for this patch because I absolutely adore Navia. I love her aesthetic. I love her play style and everything about her. And for my polls, she came home during soft pity. I did win my 50-50. That was nice. And then I decided to be a little greedy because I thought her weapon looked awesome. And unfortunately, pulling on the weapon banner, I am the proud owner of two Mist Splitters, which, while a great sword, congratulations, Bennett, you're getting a sword, and you're also going to be playing now on my Navia team. I really wanted that axe, but as it stands, the Roses and Muskets event gives a pretty good Claymore greatsword for her. So I was able to complete the event and some of those mini games. So we had, what did we have mini game wise? We had the old, basically the Sniper Elite simulator, which was interesting. We had the you play a director and like plug in the scenes and the dialogue that most fits what the scene is going for.
Mm-hmm.
There was the multiplayer aspect where you tried to basically you were a sheep herder essentially,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word, trying to get him into your own goal. That was the co-op versus three other live players, and there was a fourth bit. It's slipping my mind right now. Maybe you can help me out.
Yeah, for the fourth one, it was. You had the shooter, you had the sheep herder, you had the director, and the final one. You know what? If you hadn't forgotten it, I'd remember it. But now I'm also
Of
sitting
course, it's
here.
the one you. Well, it must not have been that memorable, right? It must have been one
Yeah,
that just
it
kind of checked the
was.
boxes and did it. Oh, it was a combat oriented one. Of course it was. That's
Yeah, it was
why
the
it's mindless
fighting.
because it is. It was mindless combat
Yeah,
with a different scenario each stage based off of some elemental trigger, right? That's why it's
yeah,
mindless because it was just spam a lot of buttons, watch your ult fill up very quickly, and use it, right?
yeah. And they had this
Um,
special thing where if you hit T,
yes.
it would. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so obviously, since we forgot about it because it was mindless combat to me, it's enough said in that regards. But for the other three, I felt the scene one, shooting the scenes or creating scenes, was there were some humorous moments you could have created in there. The sniper hunter simulator, I was actually really surprised that that was a thing in Genshin, right? Because that
Yeah.
to me isn't necessarily the aesthetic of the game, like sniping and shooting. Like
Well, I mean,
it felt out of place in Genshin. I don't hate it. It was relatively simple. It was kind of fun, creative. How can I beat these things without shooting as many bullets as possible, right? But it just felt out of place for what Genshin is. And then the
so
co-op stuff for me was that was kind of fun. It was silly and fun. But what was your take on the event?
so It was harmless. That's perhaps
Yeah, that's fair.
the kindest way I could say it, is that it was a harmless event. Didn't really cause me a lot of pain. Was very straightforward in what I needed to do. I think I knocked it out in an afternoon, as far as like getting all of the mini games and so forth taken care of. The combat event was, again, I face rolled the majority of that, and I was playing it on the highest difficulty. I never had to replay a round. I was able to get gold for all of them to move on with my life. For the movie editing one, that one was interesting. Again, I didn't really redo it at any point. I kind of just went in, looked at the keywords, picked the appropriate scene, and moved on with my life. I'm sure that you could, as you mentioned, you could create some humorous scenes and some funny bits, but I was just looking for that more. I needed my pools, and that was it. That was all I was really in there for. The sniping game, I'm going to be a little bit mean here, but I felt like it was another example of minigames impact, where they keep on putting in little systems that just don't, as you mentioned, they don't quite fit. It's sort of like trying to put a stealth game in Genshin. It just doesn't quite work.
I hated that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I brought it up because I knew you hated it, but as sort of
I loathe the stealth mechanics when that happens in Genshin story quests or events. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar for this one, where I didn't feel there was any challenge in those systems, because, and perhaps it's because I play a lot of Hitman. I play a lot of Hitman, and they had a mode in the most recent release in Hitman 3, which is actually like Hitman 12 or whatever. Doesn't matter. The more recent set of Hitman, they have a sniper mode in it that basically is all built around similar system as what the Genshin had. Hey, you gotta take people out without alerting people, and there's a lot of crazy stuff you can do with that, where you can shoot somebody off a higher floor and have them fall down and kill somebody below, and there's a lot of puzzle solving with it. Whereas the gameplay in Genshin's Sniper Elite, Hunt Hitman style game, there wasn't, and I wouldn't expect that level of interactivity, but there wasn't a lot of interactivity. It was basically see things, shoot it. If there's a barrel or a balloon or something that's explosive, you should probably shoot that. There's a couple of times where you had to maybe be a little bit patient, but for the most part, it was very paint by numbers. I was thoroughly unimpressed with it. Again, inoffensive. You could play through it without any real issue, but having played better versions of what they were putting on offer, just meh was my takeaway there. And then for the multiplayer, that one I also found fairly inoffensive. I was able to knock out the necessary points I needed to get what I needed for the sword in 4 matches. I don't think I scored below 40 on any of the ones that I played.
It took me 6 rounds to get it all.
So, yeah, for me it was fairly straightforward. I scored 70 twice, 40 twice, and I was basically done.
So I ever got 69. Nice. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so for me, it was funny because I was trying to do it, in as few games as possible. And the last game, because I think it was you needed 5,000 points in order to unlock everything in the event. And I think I was at 4,600. I was just short of getting it in the 5 plays. And so for the last one, I was literally like, you know what? I'm going to score 20 points, and I'm just going to go stand in front of somebody else. Whoever's winning at that moment, I'm just going to go stand in front of their goal, so nothing goes in. And if it does, it just starts to divert off. I'm just going to troll whoever's winning at that point in time. Yeah. I'm sorry. That's what I wanted to do. So, but it was a fun little mini game. It's usually their little mini games, like the co-op stuff, are pretty good for what they're trying to accomplish, and that one did it well. It's the tower defense one is still my favorite, but I think we kind of could maybe know that based off of some of my history in gacha games. And then I also liked they're basically their equivalent of prop game, right? But this one was up there too as being pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the 2 you mentioned are the strongest of the co-op games that they have. I do really quickly want to talk about the weapon that comes from this event. Have you
Yes,
read the description for it, or like what the
I
item does?
did. So it's an energy recharge greatsword, and then it has just in the subtext, right? It's here's a basic attack percentage increase, increased by more for every one of the dog people,
Yeah,
Melanese that you have helped, up
yeah.
to effectively doubling the base number.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of hear your thoughts on that as a, for lack of a better term, as a weapon effect.
Yeah, so that's fair because I don't mind it as an effect. What I would wish to see when they have an effect like that is that they let you know how many of those there are
Hmm.
and how many have you actually helped, like a raw count. I don't because I don't think that it's hidden. Like I don't think you can tell by the percentage necessarily that's showed. If and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong on that. But there's not a numerical way to tell how many you've helped by just looking at the sword's buff that it gives.
To my knowledge, there isn't a
Yeah.
way. Yeah, I
So I would like a physical representation to know how many I've helped so I know what that bonus is so I can compare that versus maybe if I get another great sword in the future, right, that could potentially be better for her. And I'd also like to know, like I said, how many potential Melianese are there? And I'm sorry if that's not what they're called. That's what I'm gonna call them for the sake of this, right? I would like to know how many Melianese there are and what constitutes helping them. Is it world quests or because there's also a couple of daily commissions where you're helping them as well. Does that count?
so
So I don't think it differentiates.
I believe, based off of the text when I read it, it's specific to the quests in their village. That you have to do the quests in their village, and I believe basically it's are there still quests that you have to do from people in that village? Is
All right.
the line that basically is the qualifications there. What I would say
Okay.
is I do think that putting this item in an event is another, this is going to be perhaps another topic that we will talk about in greater depth in the future, specific to Genshin Impact and Honkai, is as a 4-star limited time weapon, I don't think it should be a limited time weapon. I really do feel that this should have been an item, a weapon that you get from that village as part of a quest line, and then with each quest that you complete there, you get the refinement material. That this shouldn't be locked into an event. It should be tied much more to that location and to those quest chains to help solve kind of the issue that we brought up, where it's very vague as to what exactly the requirements are. How am I making sure that I'm completing everything to get the maximum bonus? I feel like it would have been better to tie it directly to that village and their quest lines instead of having it in a completely separate limited time event that you might or might not ever get depending on if you're actively playing at this time, if you even started playing, etc., etc. I mean, I know that this will probably be a dead horse that we'll be beating a lot over the course of this podcast, but I just,
You have strong thoughts on limited rewards during events for sure.
yeah.
Which yeah, we'll definitely be talking that in the future. But yeah, for the sake of this event, yeah, I would just wish there was a little more clarity on it. Yeah, I don't mind it so much. I like the ability to R5 a weapon in an event. Like I said, we'll touch on the longevity of now missing out on that if you don't join during this event, right? But as it stands as a weapon, I like it, especially because I missed out on Navia's weapon on the weapon banner, so it gave me something for her that is serviceable for the time being. And then the story quest for roses and muskets. I actually really enjoyed the story a little bit. The meshing of the characters from the different regions. Ayaka coming back with her brother. You had Yoimiya in there. We're introduced to a new couple. Well, what I'm imagining are going to be two new characters, right? With
Mhm.
our musket girl herself, and then of course the boutique something like that. I really liked her design. I thought they did a really good job designing her. The one thing that will always get me with these storyline events is and this they do this with Archon quests, they do this with other quests too, so it's more of just a general like really guys is when they say like wait 2 days in-game time or wait
Mhm.
for a specific time of day. It's like God, do we have to like really is that really you're gonna make me go into the menu, click on the clock, fast forward 2 days, like that's gonna, you know, I that's a side. That's not event exclusive, right? And it's a small complaint. But overall, I thought the story was pretty good, and I did appreciate the cutscene at the end of the story as well, with the big plot twist, as it were.
Yeah, I would say one of the strengths of Genshin events is when they do take characters from all the different areas and kind of throw them in a pot and let them bounce off of each other. You know, it's one of the things I really, really enjoy about the event storylines are when they do that. So, big fan of that. I think that is definitely a strength of the events. And yeah, it's kind of nice seeing Ayaka again. It's nice seeing Yoimiya again. So I don't have a lot to add on top of what you've already kind of said. I just would, I really do enjoy the fact that Genshin isn't afraid to take older characters that you maybe haven't seen for a little bit and put them next to newer ones, or take newer ones and throw them into other areas, older zones, and have them interact. It helps make the world feel a lot more alive and lived in.
Mhm.
Although it does
Yeah.
open up weird questions about, like, wait, how does travel distance work in this world? Like, it seems like what for us is a big arduous journey in order to get from place to place is something that's a non-issue once we've been there. Like,
We're the traveler. We travel. It's what
yeah,
we do. It's in our name description, right?
yeah, but why is everybody else doing it too?
Well, look, hey, I know before we wrap up, I did want to just give a quick shout out to the Nikkei for their New Year stuff they've been going out. I know it's a little off of HOYO-verse and stuff. It's another gacha that I play, Nikkei Goddess of Victory. They have been for New Year's. I was interested to see what different gachas that I played did, and Nikkei has given out essentially about 60 or 70 polls, or the equivalent to a limited banner polls, right? Because they also have the equivalent of a standard banner, like our Genshin, base would know about. But they gave out basically 70 free polls for you to use at any point in time. They just dropped a new character that was pretty anticipated, pretty looking for that. They also gave a lot of other freebies as well along with those, and are continuing to here, even though it's a couple days after New Year. I think we're still set up to get something tomorrow even, which I just wanted to give them a quick shout out, and I may reference them in future podcasts as well. That is a game that I am playing frequently.
Yeah, I mean, we both have outside gotcha interests. I also play Nikkei, so we'll bring up other stuff as they come up. I do think it is definitely notable that Nikkei has been on a generous streak. It feels like.
Genshin and Star Rail, we didn't get for New Year's specifically. Now, I know Chinese New Year is right around the corner, but for New Year specifically, unless I missed something, there wasn't really
No,
anything in either game for
not
Star
for.
Rail or Genshin.
No, I think we got. I mean, if you count mail items, I think we got some food dishes and stuff like that. Some mats. It wasn't a lot. It was equivalent to a birthday for some characters. I think Zhongli sent us something in Genshin. You can tell how much I read my mail in that. But no, it was
Blame
very
all.
minimal.
Going to the archive. Ready to go.
Yeah, most of what we've gotten recently have been pools for the awards that have come out.
Yeah, it was from the award shows, not New Year's, right?
Yeah,
That's what I thought, and I just wanted to verify. And if I had missed something that was for New Year's, backtrack, give them credit. But I was like, I don't think they have.
no. I think we're with New Year's right around, or with Chinese New Year right around the corner. I think that's going to be as per usual. I believe that will be when we get a lot of the free
Lantern Rite. Yeah, Lantern Rite is a big event for Genshin. That is true.
So, and I am curious to see what Rail's first Chinese New Year is going to look like.
That is a good point, because we will be experiencing their first new Chinese New Year in their cycle. That's correct. Good point.
Yep, and
Something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and then it'll be first anniversary right after that. So we'll see how big of a trash fire that one turns out to be.
No, we're gonna have faith that Star Rail's team has learned from the Genshin first anniversary debacle. I'm gonna stay on the optimistic side for that.
I
But
mean, I'm looking to keep warm in that trash fire. I'm not gonna lie.
That's true. It's content, right? That's true. If it is a dumpster fire, it's ultimately content. But I still hope for the best, and I think they'll get it right, or at least more right than Genshin did.
Yeah, I trust them.
All right. Well, hey, we want to thank you guys for joining us this week. Share with us your thoughts on rerolling in gacha games. Maybe you guys have a hot take about Rune May or the Battle Pass changes. Let us know in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe for notifications and more content like this. And next week, join us for the eternal gacha debate, waifu versus meta.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate.